Welcome to the Enterprise Month in Review. We have Dr. Pepper brand ambassador Brian Sommer joining me today. How we doing?
Very well. Thank you.
And welcome to the Generative AI fan club. I'm actually just kidding. That's just to make sure everyone's awake out there. If
John,
you're looking for that, you're at the wrong meeting for that.
You've heard about the transformative power of generative AI, I think.
Absolutely. I referred to automagical AI in one of my recent columns, and I got a lot of compliments for that. So yeah, let's have a look. We got a good agenda today, Brian. Actually, I skipped our overview. This is the month in review. Look, we got Thomas Otter coming up, so we got to be on our toes today. And Tom's going to have to answer for the big ideas in HR. Where the hell are they? So that's going to be fun to see if he can field that one. So you and I, we got to make quick work of our top picks so we can get Thomas in the chair there. So
sure.
So yeah, welcome to everyone. Hopefully you have, Brian and I are kind of in AI detox mode actually from a whirlwind series of events, and hopefully you got lots of fresh comments for us about what you've seen on the show circuit. So if you're in the chat, start typing away. And Brian, where do you want to begin here? Shall we start with some cringe? What do you got? Cringy buzzwords.
Yeah, so I saw that I had not seen the word proletariat until this week. And then this week, it just blew up everywhere. And,
so I feel like I'm part of the proletariat. Is that?
Oh, yeah, you're the bro hammer, according
excellent.
to the CRM players.
Man.
You're the bro hammer who's
Excellent.
Part of the proletariat. And that's what's wrong with tech today. It's a proletariat
world. What the
world,
fuck is the proletariat anyway?
Yeah, so someone's out there pimping that name, that term, like crazy in the last week, and hopefully it will disappear and die away just as fast as it showed up. But the other thing that surprised me, if you bounce to the next one, is someone on Twitter posted this, and granted, it's got a little bit of a marketing twist to it, but it sure did feel to me like they were going after the buzzword generator tool that we had, or the marketing tagline generator we have on our annual unpredictions list that we've been doing now, 7 or 8 years. And you can see there's here. Apologies to everybody. Looks like the font took a beating when it got resized for StreamYard here, but there were some newish kind of words, but it was helpful to see this listing just because you now know where all the marketers get the copy for their, screaming headlines about generative AI.
The big question is whether ChatGPT has been trained on the unpredictions. We're going to have to investigate that a little bit and see if some of our unique crafted buzzwords have shown up there.
If they have been, we're personally going to be responsible for all kinds of hallucinations and other kinds of terrible, side effects showing up as a result of the training on those unprediction.
Indeed. All right. So shall we hit our picks?
Sure.
What do we got?
You're up first, John.
All right. Wow. I love that. Love those chimes. That's really nice. So Gen AI boom eludes enterprise software for now. I could have picked a few different articles for this. I chose this one from Constellation's Larry Dignan. There was another good one from Joe McKendrick over at ZDNet. Joe's was called Generative AI. ZDNet cookies are blocking the title. Thanks a lot. Generative AI may be creating more work than it saves. These kinds of cautionary articles, I think, are really important right now for customers as they evaluate this technology. So kudos to these authors for keeping it real and documenting with data some of the struggles that have been happening. And I thought one of the most interesting juxtapositions I found was looking at NVIDIA's surging stock price. Of course, it's really nice to sell shovels during a gold rush. And then looking at the major retailers, a couple of them, including Target and Macy's, that Stuart Laughlin had covered in Diginomica, both of whom are having struggles, particularly Macy's. Needless to say, these companies are investing heavily in AI. It's just that, surprise, surprise, just investing in a new technology doesn't dramatically change your prospects necessarily, especially in the midst of so-called macroeconomic headwinds. And so there's some interesting wake-up calls here to consider, and hopefully, we'll get into a little bit more of that with Thomas as well. So, interestingly enough, I think the other thing that Larry went through in this column is he looked at different vendors like Salesforce, Workday, MongoDB, Nutanix, UiPath, and the vendors themselves kind of struggling a little bit. I think one thing that was really interesting from some of the takeaways is that some of the vendors that are investing in data and data management are doing well right now. And so Pure Storage, for example, had a good quarter we reported on. So I think it's interesting because there's this whole thing around AI preparedness is a real thing. And so vendors who are helping with that. Salesforce, for example, cited some significant growth around Data Cloud for that reason. So anyway, that's top story number one. Any comment there, Brian, before I move quickly to the next?
No, keep going.
Okay, cool. Well, this one's just a happy, lighthearted story about how Google's AI whims are destroying the open web. So, any of us who really love the idea of really cool web experiences where you linked to blogs and you went and discovered new blogs and you did all that legwork to find new ideas. Well, that was nice, but now Google's going to do that for you in inline search. And so a lot of people are rightly wondering, what's the future of web discourse and web business models in the face of all of this? And actually, this is not an overnight thing. This is something that's been building for a long time with different algorithmic changes and advancements. But anyway, Casey Newton over at Platformer had a really good article on this. And it's just an interesting topic in terms of the future of everything and, whose business models get subsumed and why. And we'll get to a whiff related to this topic later as well. And that's my stories. Brian, do you want to say anything before we move on to yours?
No, we'll go right into mine. I would agree that link deal and how it ties to revenue creation for some of these players is going to be key. All right, so my first one, I thought this was interesting because I hear a lot of vendors actually talking almost with a machismo about how their AI tools would never, ever, create hallucinations or other kind of things because they've got it so totally wired on the training and other technologies they're using to make things work right. This story on OpenAI is hilarious because of the things that popped up. Turned out that, somebody made a mistake in training, and when you train on porn sites, you get some really unexpected results. And, you guys can read this article. It's in MIT Technology Review. It is an eye-opener with all the things that, that little expression, if anything could go wrong, it will go wrong. Oh, it did that and then some. And this story has the goods on it.
Just for some viewers, I think some of the live stream wasn't streaming right. I'm not sure why. It's streaming properly now. So if you're just joining, please say hi into the comments so we know you're here. And in just a few minutes, Thomas Otter will be joining us to talk about big ideas in HR. So sorry if you missed part of the earlier stream. I think I have that on the podcast version, so we'll be able to get it to you later if you missed it. Brian, I think you have another top story, right?
Yeah. All right. This is one where it's really kind of sad when you think about how bad mid-managers have been getting it lately in the last few years. Top execs get all the big bonuses, and the middle managers, they all get laid off. In fact, the last line or so there talks about, they're the prime targets for the chopping block, 30% of them, of laid off workers and middle managers. It's a rather sobering deal. And I wanted this in here anyway, because I knew we were going to be talking with Thomas. There are some problems with the way companies hire and treat people. And and we could talk all you want about, there's a technology to capture skills. Yeah, these are the people with some of the greatest skills and corporate knowledge that are getting whacked left and right out of companies. There's something really wrong here. And I'm not sure AI is actually going to help these people that much. I mean, yes, the headline says it can make the future less miserable, but, AI is not going to solve the institutional problems with the fact these middle managers work for a bunch of cretins and abusive, folks. Anyway.
Yeah, you've been waiting on AI to solve the bad manager problem, and maybe
It ain't happening.
solve that yet.
And I might have actually snuck one more story or not. I don't know. But
yeah, I can't remember now. I'm going to take a quick peek on the slide and see. Just one sec.
Yep.
Yeah, we got another. All right, here we go.
And real quick, this one, this was an interesting study, again, because Thomas is going to be here. This one looks at how long you'll stay with the company and how well you'll do is based on whether the company has a great leader or you work with for a great manager. And it goes through it back and forth about, you could see the text here near the bottom. 38% of workers with a good manager and a poor leader said they were committed to stay. 60% of workers who reported a poor manager and a great leader said they were committed. I'm sorry. You guys can read. I don't have my glasses on right now. I'm trying to struggle through there. But the bottom line is it's the great leader. People will work for a company with, I don't know, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, whatever, at the top, and put up with a bad manager. But the other way around, a poor leader and a great manager doesn't deliver the kind of longevity you like. Anyway, it was a good story.
Cool. So yeah, I guess today is Tech Problem Day because Bonnie Tinder, hello Bonnie, said that for some reason comments aren't working for Bonnie on LinkedIn, which is probably why our comment stream's a little bit quiet. If for some reason the comment stream isn't working for you on LinkedIn and you want to comment, then pop over to Twitter on my Twitter handle, Johnny or PN. Please comment there. But anyhow, we're going to bring Thomas on in just a minute. If you missed my early picks, I'll do a podcast version of this. But we did hit some really cool overhyped tech buzzwords, including proletariat. I didn't want y'all to miss that if the stream wasn't working for you. That one is clearly going to have legs. And then my top stories were about Gen AI Reality Check from Larry Dignan, and then also Google destroying the open web in search of an AI business model, and just lighthearted stuff to wrap up the conference season. With that said, shall we see if Thomas can help us make sense of all this?
Well, this is not just Thomas. This is Thomas, who was interviewed once upon a time by Dennis Howlett, who had
look at that.
He had nothing but positive things to say about Thomas. So Thomas must have paid him off or whatever, because Dennis was just way too complimentary in that interview. But anyway.
Yeah, and Dennis doesn't generally like anybody, so that's pretty cool, Thomas. Thomas Otter, welcome.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Brian. Lovely to be on your show. I'm a bit nervous, actually.
Yeah, well, it might be appropriate to be a little nervous because we went this whole thing this spring, and I think it was like, Brian, you were reaching a point where you were about, I think, to have an implosion over the HR job description AI functionality that was being joyfully announced from every keynote stage, and it was basically an incrementalism AI style, and you basically were looking for big ideas in HR, asking every single vendor, where are your big ideas? Well, if Thomas Otter doesn't have some big ideas, then we're all screwed. Thomas, no pressure, but we're glad to have you. And by the way, folks, Thomas is now a venture capitalist. I don't know many venture capitalists, but Thomas has always had and Thomas has the enterprise chops that I look for. So I'm sure you'll have much success. And I also highly recommend Thomas's blog. You've been really quite active in your blog, which is called Work in Progress over at Substack. I highly recommend. It's a great read. So not only are you investing, but you're writing quite a bit. So that seems like you have a lot going on.
Well, thanks, John. Yeah.
I'll pile on a little bit. Thomas works with Jason Corsello. You are the two guys that founded Acadian Ventures a number of years ago. And I certainly knew Jason from his days over Cornerstone, and who you guys have as part of your advisory crew. That's kind of a who's who in the HR space. So kudos for getting that. But I would agree with John. I even got some strange pained looks rather from a software CEO that John was in the audience, and I'm basically asking, so what is your vision beyond saying AI every third sentence? What is your vision in, say, 3 to 5 years on where you're going to take the products? Because there's got to be more than slapping chat bots all throughout the application. And, to John's incremental point. So, yeah, I'm going to be fascinated to hear what you got to say, Thomas.
So let's start there, but we'll allow you to include AI in your answer. But obviously non-AI is fine too. But where are the big ideas in HR? What is getting you excited about HR tech right now?
So let me cover a moment about AI, and then we can go beyond that for a second. But saying you have AI is like saying you have weather. It might be accurate, but it's not particularly useful. You've kind of got to define what it is, and what I'd say has been happening over the last 9 months or so is that all the talk and excitement around Gen AI has been crowding out opportunities to do things with non-generative AI. So I'm actually more excited at the moment around activities with non-generative AI than I am necessarily around activities with generative AI. So I think Gen AI has got a lot of potential, but I think we've got a lot of work to do to get it right. And I think there's a tremendous amount of hype and a tremendous amount of noise, but there is the kernel, not Colonel Sanders, but there is a kernel of something useful in Gen AI. But we have work to do to get through the architecture and get down to the reality. I think one thing that's I think interesting for you guys is that if I go back 15 years to maybe even longer to when cloud came along, the incumbent vendors were completely dissing the cloud. If you remember, the on-premise vendors all said that, you can't put sensitive data into a cloud, and maybe you can do a little bit of talent management, but there's no ways you can do core processes like payroll and general ledger and so on. And, Gartner and IBM and everyone else agreed with that position. And, eventually they were all proved wrong. And then, Oracle, SAP and others had to change their tune and acquire things like success factors and so on and so on. And so it's almost as if there was this denial with the previous technology shift. And with this wave, we've got the opposite, which is where we have the incumbent vendors jumping on the AI topic with, if you like, with unseemly haste, and lots of talk about revolution and change and stuff. But I defy any enterprise vendor to do anything in 6 months. They can't roll out a new PowerPoint template in 6 months. Never mind refactor their complete product strategies. So I think in the enterprise, in the incumbent vendor space, the AI talk is way ahead of the actual reality. There's some interesting work going on in the startup world, which I'll talk up in a moment. But I would say that in the large vendors, it's a lot of talk, and there's also been a rush to monetize things that don't quite exist yet, which I think is short-sighted. I think they could be doing more to build out real adoption before rushing to revenue generation. But as a person now that's focused on the startups, I'm not really bothered about what the big guys do. I'm interested in what's going on in the startup world and what's emerging there. And I'd say, in HR tech, quite a lot is happening. It's perhaps not big complete revolution. Let's throw things on the head. There are a couple of things that are doing that, but there's a lot going outside the world of the traditional enterprise, which is where we've all historically lived and made our livings. What I've learned over the last half a dozen years is that there's a massive world outside of the outside of the big guys, which is often a lot more interesting, a lot more exciting, but also a lot more precarious. So maybe that's where we'll spend a bit of time. We'll spend a bit of time talking. So maybe I'll pause there. You guys want to beat me up now or as we go along?
I would be really interested to hear kind of what ideas you're getting from the startup side that are inspiring you. And by the way, just real quick for the audience, again, if you're on LinkedIn, which a lot of you are, and you're having trouble commenting, try to hop on over to Twitter and pop in a comment there on Johnny ERP, please. Thank you. And thanks, Bonnie, for doing that. So Thomas, tell us a little bit more about sort of what the startup side of this, where are the ideas that you think are, like you said, maybe they're a little riskier, but they're jolting the imagination a little bit. What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things have happened in the startup world over the last few years, where we might have missed in enterprise land. Again, I'd say that if you're looking at software 15 years ago, large enterprises had better tech stacks than startups did. I'd argue today that startups or mid-sized companies have better HR stacks than enterprises. There's been a rapid evolution of very compelling software for organizations between 5 employees and 2,000 employees. We've seen the rapid growth of companies like Personio out of Germany, now valued at 8 billion, valued now at 8 billion euros. We've seen the massive growth of people like HiBob, offering really lightweight, easy to use multinational platforms that really compete in that lower edge of the edge of the enterprise. And we've seen a real explosion of tooling for the SME, right? Whether it's in better recruiting software, whether it's better learning management software, whether it's in core HR administrative processes and so on. The advances in SME HR in the last 10 years have been, or last 5 years even, have been quite remarkable. So, an HR manager in a 200 employee company today has great technology, and an HR manager of a 200 employee company 10 years ago was in Excel. And if you look today, the HR manager of the 100,000 employee company is in Excel, right? And so when there's this, I think we're in a point at the moment where we have a stalemate in the enterprise, right? You've got SAP, Workday, Oracle, Ceridian, UKG, etc., and they all have their customer bases. They all have their customers, and it's a bit like I don't like military phraseology in business conversation, but we are in a bit of a everyone has their trenches, and we do have the battle lines drawn. There's a lot more fluidity in the SME world at the moment than there is in the core HR system in the enterprise. There are a few exceptions, and I'll pick on that in a minute. But I'd say that if you're looking for where there's been disruption and change, it's been happening in the mid market rather than the enterprise. And also, there's been rapid evolution outside of North America. So we've been involved in a payroll. I'm going to push a few portfolio companies as we go along, if you don't mind, because hey, that's my job. We've seen in Mexico, we've invested in a company called Worky, which does mid-market payroll in Mexico, payroll and HR in Mexico. There's been major legislative changes in Mexico, which are encouraging companies to move to electronic payrolls. That's going gangbusters. We've done investments in there's an amazing technology market in Kenya, right? Kenya is the most advanced country in the world when it comes to mobile phone usage, right? The country in the world when it comes to mobile phone usage. 75% of the GDP in Kenya goes through a mobile device, right? And so the payroll systems and the approaches around the mobile commerce in Kenya and indeed in sub-Saharan Africa are fascinating. And that's like so super cool. You think like from the Western world, oh, this is backward. No ways. The stuff that's going on there in terms of real-time payments and all the rest of it, getting your salary real-time the same day that you did the work, tax validated, all the rest of it, easy peasy. That's Kenya. It's
just real quick, Thomas, on that. I think one thing that's fascinating when you say like that they're not behind is sometimes like not having legacy infrastructure is the biggest advantage you can have, right? So, being able to kind of literally start with a whiteboard can on some level pay off for you.
Yeah. And if you look at what they're doing with pay structures, with payments, because there's an interesting synergy. So one of the areas that I think is interesting from a disruption point of view is the synergy between payroll and financial services, right? So, and this is where I think across the world there's going to be more and more disruption here, because right now what we have is a payroll, right? Which, if you think about it, is a sunk chunk of cash every month, right? Right. That's money that kind of the company owes me, right? But it's money that's sitting in the treasury provisions of the company. And come the end of the month or the end of the 2 weeks or whatever pay system you receive your payment. And for most of us, 75% of what goes from my payroll goes out the same day, right? When it lands in my bank account, it pays the mortgage, it pays the 400 subscriptions of various Netflixes, Amazon this, Amazon that, the money disappears, right? And so it's an extremely backward financial arrangement that the trillions of dollars every month trapped in this payroll process. And so I expect to see more and more interesting innovation on bringing together a banking and payroll, both in a large enterprise level. We're seeing some of this already, with corporate cards and so on. But I think there's all sorts of innovation opportunities in payroll, in rethinking payroll processing. So, if we think about where I'm more excited about AI is when we start to apply it to some of these traditional processes. So I've seen some really cool innovations in terms of integration technologies using AI. So I can rapidly lower the friction between systems by using AI to assist in integration, design, and integration maintenance and integration operations. So this kind of resets the balance between best of breed and suite. Because if I lower the costs of integration and I improve the quality of integration, then I'm able to deploy more best of breed applications, right? So there's a whole lot of interesting things bubbling up at the moment in HR tech. I'm not seeing like, oh wow, someone's completely blown the whole model of HR on its head, and we won't be needing a Workday or a whatever in the future. A lot of interesting stuff, for instance, in remote work. You look at the growth of companies like Deal and Oyster. We're an investor in Oyster, but this ability to work globally, to spend 3 weeks in the Bahamas and then 4 weeks on Ibiza. As a good friend of mine once said to me, at 55, we've got about 30 summers left. We might as well double them. So the opportunity to follow the sun, to work in different places, to make global mobility more effective, simpler. There's a whole lot of stuff going on in those areas. There isn't yet, and I'm looking for it. As an investor, I'm dying to find the company that makes, no offense to Workday and SAP, but makes them irrelevant. But I've not yet seen the concept that does that. There are a few bubbling ideas, but we're not yet at the point where we start to see, what could that alternative be. But it will come at some point. It will come. It's happened before, and it will happen again.
Sorry for the buzzkill, Brian, on that last point. Just real quick, programming note. Feel free to put in your comments on big ideas in HR. I also pasted in a link to one of Thomas's deep posts on payroll, present and future. I recommend a look at that. Brian, don't get Brian started on payroll. I'm sure you have something that I have an axe to grind I want to get off my chest, but I don't want to stop you now that payroll's been brought up. So
Well, I'm going to see the AI tool that actually automates the payroll to general ledger interface and generates all the accruals, automatically generates reversals, does all of that, and does it using AI and gets it right and tight in seconds every single pay period. That would be fantastic. And
I think I think the guy to speak to on that, we've not invested in this company yet. I think perhaps one day we might, but you should speak to Jerome Gouvernail at Datascaler. So Jerome Gouvernail at Datascaler is doing some very interesting stuff. He's ex-ADP, and he spent a lot of time, getting to grips with the nitty-gritty of AI, and he's able, for instance, to connect a country payroll from country A to core HR system in country B in a very short period of time. Like, we're talking hours and days rather than the months and years that those kinds of activities took place. So I think these are the areas where I think AI is going to get very interesting. It's going to be some of these boring things, right? It's going to be some of these nitty-gritty back-end processes, but they don't get the initial hype attention. But I think that these are the areas that are going to be super interesting. These are the areas where we're looking to fund. Sure, we're doing some very interesting, cool stuff, but for me, these administrative processes are precisely the place where AI can be transformative and can bring a level of accuracy. Now, it's not Gen AI. This is the point I'm making. So this is not using Gen AI. This is using AI.
In fact, if I may quote one of my favorite lines from one of your payroll blogs, hallucinating on payroll isn't cool. I think that pretty much sums up the Gen AI payroll problem pretty well there.
Right. And I'm not advocating this is a Gen AI application, but this is a massive time sink problem for corporate accounting and for payroll. And the worst environment is when you have a mid-sized company that has global operations all over the place, because they don't even have to be terribly big, and they may have 100 different payroll providers in all kinds of different countries. Yeah. And you know it as well as I do, Thomas. Nobody necessarily gets everything right about the payroll run. And next thing you know, they're backing stuff back out. They're rerunning. They're doing all kinds of things. The error correction cycles those are maddening for people in accounting. Yeah. So that's an opportunity. It's more of a machine learning kind of problem more than anything else. It should recognize.
Yeah. So the pattern recognition. There's a pattern recognition of anomaly detection. There's a whole bunch of work going on there, which is super interesting. So I was actually speaking to a startup today. I spoke to a cool startup this morning, So a couple of areas where I think there is innovation. So a couple of things where I'm super excited about is frontline technology that address the frontline worker. Mm-hmm. Right. So HR technologies that we all know and love, they've generally been designed by knowledge workers for knowledge workers. Right.
Okay.
So the frontline worker space is that there is a lot of interesting stuff going on there. Maybe I'll pick one up that I was talking to this morning. What they do is they look at they're looking at machine repair issues, right? And what they know is that the average age of a machine repairer, who I'm talking about an industrial context here, who goes in and I'm not talking about fixing your washing machine, but I'm going in, it's, fixing the machine that prints the circuit board that goes in the Tesla, right? That machine breaks down, the production line grinds to a halt. How do you correctly, diagnose the problem? And, part of it is the machine problem, but part of it's also the human that's operating the machine. How do we get the information out of that human? How do we get that tacit knowledge, out of the workforce and make that into more consumable, combine it with machine diagnostics and so on. So some really interesting stuff going on at the frontline worker stage. We invested in one company called AG5, which is also frontline pay. Basically, your big corporate HR systems got a whole bunch of skills data in there, right? So Thomas knows English and German and Afrikaans, and he knows a bit about selling HR software, right? That's probably the most that you're going to get out of core HR system about me. But the interesting stuff is if you're, again, in a factory, I don't care that you can work, that you have print die experience. I want to know, can you work machine number A on the production line? Are you certified to work machine number A from 1952 on the production line? And so what this company does is it's got a really cool tool for the shop floor, for the line manager on the shop floor manager, to make sure that the right people are working on the right machine at the shop floor level in real time. But so nowadays, that's most organizations, even big companies, that's all in Excel, right? And so the idea then is you use a little bit of AI, but it's just a really cool, lightweight, easy to use, mobile centric device-based solution that gives the shift manager complete control over who's working on what machine, so that you don't have doors flying off airplanes and stuff. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on in HR tech. There isn't this thing yet, like I said earlier, that blows the big guys out of the water. But it wouldn't surprise me if we see something the next year or two that makes us go, geez, that's the next big thing.
Bonnie's curious about how you see AI changing the price model for these SaaS companies. With less friction and more automation, it should bring costs down, right? Bonnie, I'm not sure we're going to see price discounting for AI anytime soon, but it's an interesting question. And I do think one thing I think that's been good about AI is a renewed focus on different types of pricing models, including value-based and consumption-based pricing and things like that. Your thoughts, Thomas?
Well,
Brian's got something to say first.
Oh, sorry, Brian.
Rarely does anyone talk over Brian, but I seem to have been able to manage it.
Okay, I was actually going to reference Thomas's comment to Bonnie's comment and say Thomas Evernet's correct. Sridhar spoke about this in his keynote this week, and he talked about how the cost. He was just showing how, with ever more powerful computing tools, how the cost of code and everything else keeps collapsing, and we're now approaching zero. And he talked about
but how many companies are going to pass that savings on to their customers? I would say Zoho's on a pretty short list there of companies that probably would.
Well, true, but anyway, that's another topic for a whole nother podcast. But I'm acknowledging Thomas that point, and there is a real question here, because these AI tools the generative ones can generate code, they can generate test scripts, they can do all this kind of stuff and get the cost down. But anyway, that's a side point.
Yeah. So I think on that, I think is a really good point, is that we're going to see the serious growth of low code, no code tooling deployed in enterprise. The question for me is not what replaces your ERP systems, but what replaces the Excel. What replaces the world of Excel. And traditionally, the world of Excel is being tried to be replaced by a couple of people developing a little SaaS application. They get 5 engineers and they build a nice SaaS application. That means you don't need your Excel for that process anymore. And that's all well and good, and then there will still be those companies. But I think the tantalizing opportunity is the return of a robust DIY capability. I mean, for instance, if you look at, I've got no connection with the company, but I've been spending a bit of time trying to learn about AI myself, which is challenging given that I hated maths at high school and I haven't touched it since. So you want a humbling experience, is try and do some maths after 30 years. It does change your.
Same here.
When you have to ask your kids, when you have to ask your kids how this stuff works, and they say, "Dad, this is so simple," then you got to learn. But anyway, what I was saying is I've been using a tool called Data IQ, and if you look at this, kind of tooling, the power that you can do from an analytics perspective is quite remarkable. You should get some of those people on your call, but I think the opportunities for quite sophisticated stuff within your own organization, I think that starts to become more realistic. It's not going to be a nirvana, but I think there's definitely opportunities for DIY tooling. And back to the pricing point of view, I always differentiate between value creation and value capture, right? So value capture is when you turn value creation into a pricing moment, right? And that's a factor of supply and demand, of competition, of urgency, and of all those kind of factors. And right now, the value capture in AI is going to NVIDIA, right? Right. It's not in the lightweight. It's not like the SaaS vendors are suddenly getting like mega profitable or whatever. The value flow is the value capture at the moment is in the infrastructure layer. Now, as that infrastructure layer starts to commodify, we'll see the value capture move up into the application layer. But at the moment, we don't really know where the value creation is. The value capture can be in the application layer. So, NVIDIA hit 3 trillion market cap this week. So that's where the money's going at the moment. It's not going to the application vendors. But at some point, it'll swing back. Historically, again, the early days of client server, the hardware guys did really well. And then that power then swung to the database vendors, and then swung to the application vendors. And we'll see the same. We'll probably see the same cycle, emerging now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
So I know we're going to be hitting the wall here on time. I really want to go into the future a bit more with Thomas while we got him.
Yep. Okay. Cool.
Thomas, I could already see AI and generative AI in particular is already creating a lot of new problems for HR people when we've got job applicants who are using AI to write or rewrite their resumes, to write thank you letters, to generate potential interview questions and responses, and we've got job seekers using AI to apply to 5,000 jobs in 1 week for one person. Yep. So AI is creating all kinds of new work and problems for HR people. And I haven't seen any vendors come up with any countermeasures or solutions to the new Gen AI created problems. Are you seeing anything coming up on your radar? Does anybody even talk about these kind of things? Because it seems like, okay, well, tell me. I want to hear this. This is gold. If you got it.
So we made investment 3 weeks ago into a company based out of Utah called SquarePeg, right? And again, aiming at SME recruitment, but one of the key capabilities in their product is to help deal with the wave of automated applications that are hitting SME. We did an investment in Fund 1 into a company called CopyLeaks, right? And CopyLeaks is probably today the leading plagiarism detection software. And what that's able to do is spot to a pretty good rate examples of Gen AI generated writing. So even if you put it through 3 or 4 times, it can still figure it out. It can also spot, which is very, very important in the software world, spot generated code, because it's all very well hallucination in a document is one thing, right? Hallucination in some software code is a pretty scary thought. And so, this helps identify that. CopyLeaks has gone gangbusters. That's one to look at. But we're very excited about SquarePeg. You should check that one out. It's still very, very early days, but we do sort of see some interesting, definitely some interesting activity there. So there are a whole lot of negative externalities around the usage of Gen AI in terms of privacy, in terms of hallucinations, in terms of discrimination, racism. There are a whole lot of issues that we have to grapple with Gen AI in HR. So one of the areas where I'm really keen to do investment in the moment is actually in tools that help. And I've looked at a few startups doing this, tools that analyze for legislative risk. So when you deploy an AI product, I want to know, is this product compliant? Where did the data come from? What safety measures are in place? What guardrails are there? Does it meet standards, NIST or EU AI Act, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot going on at the moment to try and figure out, to help mitigate the negative externalities of AI. But the stuff is still, very early stage of fermentation.
Yep. I'm glad you mentioned code hallucinations because we don't have time for this today, but I take some issues with the developer efficiency conversation for that reason. I think it's a little bit overrated for that reason. I actually more excited about using Gen AI for business users to describe what they want out of applications and turn that into relatively useful code that IT can then polish. But that's a whole different conversation. Yeah.
And the other way, one last example in payroll where Gen AI is very useful is in analyzing statute. Right. So basically you have like masses of regulations. You say, hey, what's changed? And if you've got a carefully trained, it's more of a small language model than it is of a large language model. It might be a RAG on the side of an LLM that is trained specifically on legislative requirements. And so you can analyze all the, OSHA changes and tell me what's changed in OSHA from last year to this year.
You can train a model. You could train a model literally on those regulations, and
precisely, and that's where it kind of gets super interesting. So I'm seeing a couple of these plays emerging as well, which again is a great use case for Gen AI. Right.
Okay, Brian, I want to ask Thomas a final question, then we're going to wrap. My final question is the axe to grind I referred to earlier, which is I think a lot of focus of AI and Gen AI has been on improving the current circumstances of software and functionality, and I think some of that's useful, like you described the pain points around payroll, and I think that's a really good use case. But I think one of the big problems I've had with the big HR vendors, and it's starting to change a little bit, but it seems to me it's not totally their fault, but it seems to me that the workforce has changed much faster than HR solutions have changed. Right. So you have such a fluid workforce now, and people that are juggling multiple gigs, they want to get paid by the hour, they want to payroll that day, they want to juggle multiple companies, they want to have employee status, and they want to be a contractor again, they want to go back and forth. And it feels, it's not totally the vendor's fault, but it feels like the whole workforce is sped up to a point where vendors have had a hard time keeping up. Do you think that, is that a valid premise? And if so, do you think some of these startups are thinking like that? I mean, you refer to some of the international implications of that as well, which I think is the other piece of it.
Yeah. I think you're onto something. I mean, look, not every job is like that, and so we have to be careful that we don't. Right. The world is not made up of software developers, right? So, the expectations of the expectations that we think of in terms of
if you're like a government employee, if you're a government employee or something, your life isn't like that.
If government employee, then not a whole lot of change. Maybe some work from home, maybe some work from home options. There's been some changes there, but if you want to get a great person on your show to talk. The changes in workforce dynamics. Tony Yamas at Oyster is brilliant, right? He really looks at the whole. He runs a company he runs a global company. It's a Series C level company, employing several hundred people, and it's completely remote. He lives on Cyprus, right? And it provides global HR services around the world. If you need software developers and they happen to live in Bulgaria, then he can make sure that they're part of your company in an extended sense, but they're paid correctly according to Bulgarian taxation and whatever it is. And that system manages all of that stuff. So it's a great example of this modern remote work switch from contractor to employee type environment. But yes, I think the traditional vendors have not really embraced the. So for instance, you take SAP, they bought Fieldglass ages ago. The levels of integration between Fieldglass and success factors are minimal. If you look at Workday, they bought Vindley, but they've not done from where I'm sitting, they've not done a whole lot with it. And so there's a work to do in terms of that, in terms of thinking of that broader extended workforce. That's for sure.
Yes, indeed. Well, we'll leave it there for today, but Thomas, thanks a lot for getting in the hot seat to try to take some of Brian's accumulated frustrations, and we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
And apologies, Thomas. I had no idea that you'd been set up so hard, thinking you were going to get manhandled by me. Everybody seems to think I'm going to be the bad guy today. But anyway, you got off all right.
Right. We love you, Brian. We love you, Brian.
Right.
Keep it up, Thomas. We'll track you on your blog and catch you next time.
Cool. And we should talk again soon. Yeah.
And pass my regards to Jason when you speak with him next.
I will. I'll probably be speaking to him in an hour or so. So I will.
He may even be watching. He may even be watching. He did accept the show invite. So.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Oh, gosh. He may be watching.
Thomas.
Well, great seeing you guys. Thanks for having me on the show.
You got it.
See you, Thomas.
That's Thomas Otter. Yep. Well, Brian, I don't know if we totally got big ideas in HR, because that's a lot to ask of any one person, but I think we got some better ideas. How's that? We definitely got better ideas. So. Yeah,
and I think he has some more. Let's say he's got a very thoughtful and pragmatic way of looking at stuff from the way another viewpoint of the market. And it's not the usual incrementalism kind of stuff we keep hearing from all the biggie enterprise vendors. So
no doubt. Thomas was just what we needed. So that was great.
So John, looks like it's time for the call for you to tell us the
whiff of the month.
What the boneheads of the world did the last month. So
this was a really good one, because this was I subscribe over at the independent outlet 404 Media, and they are just killing it over there. Google is paying Reddit $60 million for Fuck Smith to tell its users to eat glue. I mean, that's got to be one of the best headlines of the entire year. But basically, Google search, the new AI inline search, recommended non-toxic. At least it was non-toxic. Non-toxic glue is a way to avoid the cheese sliding off your pizza at home. And
John, you're a sucker for clickbait, but go ahead.
Oh,
you love good clickbait.
Someone actually did try to do it too. Someone made a pizza and wrote about it. I think they even ate some of it, but I think they were fine, but they said it didn't taste very good. But anyway, the interesting thing about it as pertains to the training data is then some clever people went in and actually found the Reddit post where this idea was initially proposed that had wound up in the training data, and it was from a user named Fucksmith. So that's where the headline came from. So anyhow, that's a colossal whiff. It gets kind of back to a lot of what we were talking about. And then we had Canva redesigning work, one of the most infamous keynote performances of all time. If I trusted video technology better, I would play a little bit during our show, but I feel like that's pushing the envelope. We had a couple tech issues earlier already, so I'm not going to do that. But if you get a chance, have a look at this. It definitely brought me great joy.
Don't watch it on a full stomach. By the way, I was in a van full of industry analysts this week. Vibernet was one of them. And it was surprising, on a bus we were on going to another, function for this vendor. What was everybody talking about? The Canva video. And so I'll leave the audience with the thought that you might want to check it out, because it is, without a doubt, the one thing you never want a vendor to do. Would that be a fair enough description, John?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the thing that fascinates me is all the small bad decisions that added up to one big epic fail, because so many people had to greenlight this at various stages in order for it to become reality. That's the beautiful thing. And I think the lesson here is that, to me, the overriding lesson is that when you get drunk on your own Kool-Aid, you're going to make a fool out of yourself, and it happens, unfortunately, too much. And, we all are prone to that tendency, but that's why you have to get out more and make sure that your ideas get challenged before they wind up on stage.
I'm expecting this to become a marketing class case study that someone with Harvard Business Review is going to put together, and it'll be something that gets taught in B schools all over the planet.
Yeah. Right. And I don't even know on that right-hand article, like, what Seinfeld is doing in there, but like,
I don't either. Yeah.
But it's just such a great graphic. And then Thomas says, did you hear that Google as well as MS Bots currently do not answer questions regarding the EU Parliament election or the upcoming US elections at all? Yeah, so it's basically like, I've said before that consumer search is the worst use case, but it's just kind of sad. It's like we're willing to settle for bullshit in exchange for that kind of convenient format. It doesn't bode well for society, I don't think. Frank Scavo says shades of vendor events during .com mania. Indeed. In fact, it was during .com that I saw a whole flourishing of vendors writing songs about themselves and stuff like that. And those songs haven't aged very well, by the way. I think I still have one from Novell about NetWare, maybe. Didn't really hold up over time. I don't have that on the old, Spotify playlist at the moment. So let's see. What do we got next, Brian?
That may be about it.
Something that inspires, creates value. Well, man, talk about changing subjects from squandered resources and epic fails. What does inspire and create value, Brian?
Well, I think the customer wants to see prices go down, but I'm not sure, we were talking about, well, I don't think vendor anthems, you keep flashing that up, are going to inspire or create value at all. But
vendor anthems don't create value?
No,
come on.
No, I'm going on record on that. The other thing that,
by the way, hi Frank, nice to see you in the chat.
Yeah. The one thing that really doesn't do it for me are vendors wasting money on jock keynotes. And again, we could do a whole podcast on why I don't like those. But I saw somebody did a transcript of one, and I don't have a link for it, or I'd share it right now. But this jock is talking about, it's doing every sports cliche there is about everyone's going to have to give 110%. We got to push this over the goal line. It was on and on and on with this. And it was obvious this person had no idea what this tech company made, sold, or delivered. So if you don't even know what the product is, you sure as hell can't create value. But anyway, sorry, I got off on a rant there.
No worries, man.
At least I waited until after Thomas finished. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just that we haven't really answered the question. I mean, this is sort of, maybe we should put it to the audience. What inspired you or created value in the last month? Let's hear it. And please don't put like a vendor's product in the chat. Please don't do that.
If you did that, I'm going to pull up that video we did on Astounding ERP.
Astounding ERP, right?
The only ERP that slices and dices and makes julienne fries out of your old backup tapes.
If you order this week, indirect access charges are free. Sorry, that refers to an old public service announcement that Brian and I recorded back in the day. That created value, Brian.
Oh yeah, I think Frank Scavo here even had to pull off the 405. He was laughing so hard when he was listening to that one in real time.
It's Thomas. Yeah, he says the unconditional love that my dog shows all the time. Indeed.
Inspiration. Well, guys, I'm not trying to grind on this stuff on the AI, but Thomas did a really nice job today at talking about a number of the different AI capabilities. The things that I think we really need to be looking at are new ways of, in fact, let me back up. I loved how I spent time with another investor who recently told me that we need to look at software companies on a very simple way. What is their number one priority? Is it the customer? Is it the prospect? Is it their end user that the software supposedly serves? Or is it their owner or investor or private equity firm? And when you look at a company and you see which one of those is their number one priority, boy, do you really get a clue as to what it's going to be like if you're going to become a customer of theirs. And that's rule of GPT 4.0. Frank.
That's really low, Frank. Oh my gosh. Frank Scavo's having fun with us, Brian. He says that GPT 4.0 is what inspires and creates value. Oh my God.
All right.
Oh wow. I see we're at the point of diminishing returns.
Yeah, I think it's time to hang it up for this month.
Yeah. Well, I will just say, I think like, the things that continue to like inspire are when I find myself at events and, it's the kind of things where when vendors are creating an opportunity to have open discussions, because there's so much to learn right now. And, I saw that at the ASUG show where I was hanging about a bunch of executives and just hearing their raw views on what they're dealing with. And, to me, if you can start there, then everything starts to make sense. And I think the risk we run is that we're so far into the automagical transformation stuff that we lose track of, the pulse of what people deal with day to day. And so to me, what inspires is kind of hearing that. And even if it's the hard stuff, I want to hear it, because the stuff that people are struggling with is exactly where to start. And, one of the things I keep telling vendors is, why don't you churn AI on all of that stuff? Like, churn AI on all the friction you create with your contracts and your licensing and your pricing. In the age of AI, should anyone ever get audited again for software? Shouldn't they all have dashboards that tell them exactly what they're using and where any potential costs are? Anyway, so the point is, like let's have those kind of conversations, and then we can all be inspired. And Frank says Scarlett Johansson. Yeah, Frank, Google Scarlett Johansson if you haven't been tracking that one. I'm not sure if that inspires, but it's certainly hot. It's I think as trending topics for sure. That's trending.
Well, it's trending right now because that Chinese Chat GPT thing trained on her voice, and without permission. And I suspect there's going to be some nice litigation coming out of that.
Yep. And man, it's so hard to stay on something that inspires and creates value. That's why I like this slide so much. Like, like to just stick on this topic is sometimes tough the way things are going. Anyhow, Brian, I think we've done it. Thanks all for joining. Your participation makes a big difference. Sorry, we had a couple tech issues, but I think we got through them. And you can expect to see us again next month for another edition of the Enterprise Month in Review. Thanks a lot. See you, Brian.
Take care, everybody.